Welcome in, everyone. Hello, hello. Mic check. Thank you all for joining us. Welcome in the chat. We see here we have Marlisa. Good afternoon. We have Patricia Campos. Hello. Thank you for joining us. Tim, we have you returning for your second time, I believe, as guest host. How are we doing?
I'm so excited I got asked back, so thank you. It's great, Amani, to be here. I'm glad your co-host Mandy trusted me to fill her shoes again, so I couldn't be happier.
Yes, yes. We're excited to have you back. Of course, you'll be asked back. You've been a great guest, a great co-host in the past. Since we last saw you, what's new?
I don't know when I last saw you, but probably lots of things. I probably have started a new role in my career. I'm now I like to learn new areas of the business place, and I'm now the CHRO for an awesome company in San Diego. It's called California Coast Credit Unions, 95-year-old company with a kind of a chain of great financial institutions around Southern California. I've been here about 9 months, so this is a whole new industry for me, and so that's new since we last spoke. Creatively, besides I the work's going great, but in creatively, I keep doing some different things. A new book just came out last week. It's
Yes.
called Oh, you mean this? It's called Snitchland. It's a graphic novel. It's a second in a trilogy of graphic novels that I've. The first was called Witchland, and this is a direct sequel to that. It's kind of a mysterious ghost story, all centered around the world of whistleblowers in the workplace. And yeah, I hope people like it. That just came out last week.
All right. So tell us more. Tell us how were you able to create this? What was the inspiration, and what was and how did you finish? Because a lot of times we have a lot of people that want to write books, but finishing is very difficult. So how were you able to finish?
Yeah, I wrote a leadership book. I think back when I was at the San Diego Zoo I was there for a long time, and I wrote a leadership book there. And I love writing, and it really, I think I told you last time, it was during COVID where during quarantining, all of us kind of experienced COVID differently, and that time. And for me, it was a chance to kind of tick off my bucket list, some things I really wanted to do, and one was to write a play, and the other was to write a cookbook. Those two things, and I'd never
Yes.
done either, attempted either, or even knew what to do. So I really self-taught myself in 2020 to write a play, and that play was called Witchland. It's based on my hometown. I had a really specific idea in mind of what I thought would be a fun, immersive play, based on kind of my family and based on a real place. And to my delight and surprise, it took off, and it's made the rounds as a play. It just went off Broadway in New York. It's pretty amazing, and then I thought that it would be really fun to. I love comic books. I love graphic novels. And so I thought it'd be really a new fun challenge to take the play and adapt it into a graphic novel format. So if you don't know graphic novels, I hired this really amazing artist that I found online. His name's Pyrink out of Mexico City, and he just does this amazing artwork. And so it's really, I took the
Ooh.
whole play, and it's really like a bound comic book story, and I released that in February of this year, Witchland, as the first graphic novel, and people just have really, really responded, really well to it. So of course I jumped right into sequel mode. So
Yeah, yeah,
Witchland tells the story of the family who moved to this mysterious place. It's a home of a kind of a nuclear reactor cleanup, which is a real place, and scary things happen to this family, and you don't know if it's because of something in the environmental or something a little more sinister. So in Snitchland, I wanted to kind of shift it around and really, I've been in HR for a long time. I've been in the workplace for a long time, and I just read all these stories of kind of extreme whistleblower stories, especially in my hometown, of folks who kind of brought safety concerns to the forefront, and many of them experienced a lot of kind of retaliation and backlash for that. And so I thought it'd be fun to write a mystery about that. So I've turned it into a ghost story where a ghost of a partner is helping him solve this mystery of in the workplace of why this workplace accident happened. And so I really I wanted to kind of mix the kind of the supernatural with the environmental. So I kind of did a mashup of I say it's like a mix of, if you threw Ghost the movie in with Aaron Brockovich, you might have Snitchland. So it's kind of
yeah.
that type of story. And then
All
and
right.
then so I finished it, and it's out now. And then that play. And then there's a third one, and they all have a play and a graphic novel. The third one will come out in February. It's called Twitchland, and it's full on terror scariness. So it's been a fun new chapter of my career late in life that I've discovered that I do this in my spare time when
Yeah.
I'm not at work in my day job.
Yeah. So how were you able to finish? Like, what was the
Oh,
hardest part about
oh
finishing this
gosh.
one compared to your first one?
Well, the first one was hard. I never thought I would finish it, and plus, I didn't really know with COVID. It's kind of an experiment I was doing, and then once I committed to myself that this is a project that I'm going to finish. I'm not going to have this be one of those ones that you start and just don't finish. And so, I took 2020 to kind of toil away at it whenever I could. And then once I saw that kind of COVID was, there was maybe a cure in sight, a vaccine in sight, I really had to kind of light a fire under myself to say, I'm going to finish this. So I kind of locked myself in and went into kind of lockdown mode for like the last month and just knocked it out and finished it. I mean, that really was it. I tied a bow on it and finished it. And I thought that would be it. And then I kind of took the next step and shopped it around to some people, and they really responded well, and then it took off. So for this one, for Snitchland, that it was, I kind of had the routine down. I knew I learned about the writing process, and so writing a play, converting it to a graphic novel. I'd be able to put a little team together of myself and my artist and my publisher and publicist, and so it was easier this time around. And since then, since I got the first one done, in 2020, since 2020, I've now published 2 cookbooks, written 5 plays, 2 plays that are going all over the place, and now a series of graphic novels. So all of this happened since 2020. So I
Yeah.
just have found a good way, I think, today's topic, to balance it all and to have this, really fulfilling and engaging, enriching daytime job and career, which I love. And then I have this side job that I do on the side, which is more of a passion project, and I can really express my creative side, and it's really a way to kind of keep me growing and developing and not rest on my laurels and move forward. And it's been an amazing chapter that I never saw coming a couple of years ago.
I love it. Awesome. Congratulations. Can't
Well,
wait
thank
to
you so
see
much.
where this one takes you. Hello to Winfred Harn Cook in the chat. Thank you for tuning in. And that's actually a good
Okay.
segue to our guest today. So our guest today, Kristine Iverson. So many, many great things that we're going to learn and understand and talk to Kristine about. A couple fun facts I love to share. We have to ask her about what it was like to be a contestant on The Blocks, BLOX, there. And then also, along with myself and Mandy, we're one of Meeting Today's top 20 trendsetters for 2024, really experienced in the meetings and events industry. So with that, we're going to welcome Kristine Iverson to the stage. We're going to give you a round of applause. Yes. Awesome. So, my first of all, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you. Mandy is very sad that she's going to miss you being with us today.
Oh, good. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Awesome. What would be your definition of stress?
Hmm. I would define stress as when it could be several different things. One, short-term stress is when your prefrontal cortex is impacted, but it's really when we're not at our best. To use a generic blanket term, when whether it's physically, emotionally, there could be many different levels to it, but we are not functioning at our optimal best.
Okay, that's your definition of stress. We're going to talk a lot about this today. What are maybe some of your top two or three ways to manage stress the best way?
Sure. Pausing. Is it an email that came through where you're triggered, rather than quickly responding, checking in on what your emotional gauge is. So many times, if we can pause and break away from whatever is triggering us, even get some perspective, whether that perspective can come from yourself in space, maybe making a phone call, getting someone else's opinion, depending. But pausing, taking a break, and not responding immediately would be one tip. Secondly, I'm going to say self compassion. I feel like
Mm,
we are humans being human, and to extend that to ourselves as well as others, like we're if we come at life believing that people are doing the best that they can in that moment, in that situation, we don't know what stressors someone has in their jobs, coming at them, so they come at you. Stress often rolls downhill.
right.
So depending on where you are in that chain, it's being given to you or you are giving it. So yeah, self-compassion for yourself first and foremost, and for others, just understanding, that, hey, how many times have I like had a knee-jerk reaction or not phrased something appropriately?
Yeah. Awesome. Tim, over to you. I know you got a bunch of questions too. Go ahead.
I have so many questions for you. I've been in HR for a long time, and part of that has been, about wellness and well-being and benefits, and it's an area that I'm passionate about. And I was reading your website and all that you've done with your book. I want to talk about all that in your story, but I love how one of your I don't know if it's your titles or monikers that you or roles that you have is listed as a mental fitness speaker. And I would love to hear what I think I know what that means, but maybe you could tell us what is mental fitness and what do you do in your practice to in kind of preaching and speaking about mental fitness?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks so much, Tim.
Yeah.
Mental fitness, overall, 2025, it is a growing segment, but it all comes down to our own stress management. Mental fitness is very much in this space. There's a gamut of tools, and remembering that one tool may really work good for one individual and another one, I can take it or leave it. I'd say having different tools in your tool belt and then knowing when to access it. Um, so, one example of this, it's an upward spiral and a downward spiral. So, if we look at ourselves and our thoughts as energy, let's say something is presented to you. I'll use the example of an email. Let's say you can upward spiral, thinking positively, or you can begin to downward spiral. And the spiral, it can start out small. I'll use the downward spiral, like maybe you're bored. That's at the very top of that spiral. And then let's say you start to get frustrated and irritated. So that's a higher level of, let's call it, like negative energy, right? And now that frustration and irritation has turned more into, when it starts to go into more anger, more into these heavier emotions, it's going to have a greater impact. So we need to train our brains and rewire our brains and recognize, okay, we're humans. We're all going to be on this spiral. Going down does not necessarily, it's not necessarily a bad thing. We're not wrong. We're human, right? We're all going to experience these emotions. When you go to the bottom level of a downward spiral, and sometimes it's like when we get triggered and if we react, and then that next person that you had a reaction with, they can then get triggered. And then you're both triggered, communicating, you're not listening to one another. It can be a downward spiral. And last thing I'll say, like on that downward spiral, there are some emotions. I know shame and guilt, they're going to be heavier emotions. You can't, with some emotions, you can snap your fingers and just, you know what? I'm going to change my thought about the situation. Hey, this isn't, this isn't a bad thing. I'm going to reframe it in my brain and I'm going to say that this is a great thing, right? But with some scenarios, if you're feeling guilt or shame, you can't necessarily snap your fingers and just reframe something because you don't believe it, right? And if you don't believe it yourself, you can't bring your own energetic spiral up. So then there's another tool to use for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's awesome. I'm a huge proponent of avoiding that downward spiral, I think, whenever you can. So what are some ways you talked about changing your mindset? Like, how do you, cultivate a resilient mind and change that mindset to avoid that downward spiral?
Excellent. Multiple ways. I'll just mention two. One, which is more the upward and downward spiral, can be done like in an instant. But when we're dealing with a thought, like if you don't believe, so if I believe that I'm not a good parent, right? I can say over and over, 10 times a day, 20 times a day, 50 times a day, I'm a good parent, but I'm not believing that for myself, right? So a thought ladder, you would go in increments. You can say, sometimes it's like we need to look on the external and say, okay, well, my friend Betty, I believe I'm not a good parent because I yell at my kids. Well, my friend Betty will yell at her kids, but I know that Betty's a good parent, you know? So, okay, I can see that in someone else outside of myself. And then I can begin to incrementally change my thoughts. I can't go from, I believe I yell at my kids, so I'm a bad parent, to in an instant, no, I'm a good parent. But I can begin to change my thoughts to seeing someone else outside of myself, to seeing actually, my children are the most important thing in my life. I'm doing the best I can at this moment, and incrementally those thoughts up. And then secondly, for another example, and I've actually been recently relearning and doing this practice myself, but it is recently I have been in kind of viewing, when you get in a mindset and you're viewing everything negatively, right? It just seems like everything coming at you, like everything happening, and you're just viewing it through a lens of negativity. So recognizing that and writing every single day at least 5 positive things. And then kind of, I don't want to say ignoring necessarily some of the negative things, but if you can, just wipe it away, move on, only look at the positives, right? And it takes a rewiring of the brain, and it's work. And the act of physically writing it down can be so helpful in terms of rewiring our mindsets.
Interesting. Now, with all your training in terms of stress management and what you do, how did you find your way and make such a big impact in the events industry?
So I have a checkered past of a career. I've done many, many things. When I graduated college, I still had no idea what I wanted to do, but I wanted to travel. I've worn many hats. I was working on cruise ships for a second time, and then left. And my next thing that I knew I was going to do was get a yoga certification. Still didn't know what the career path looked like throughout. And I worked for DMCs before. So I understood the live event industry from a DMC perspective. So I had that background. When I was going through the yoga certification, it allowed me to tap into myself, and just figure out and be confident and clear with what I wanted to bring to the world. And for an entire year, I asked myself the question and remained in the inquiry: if money didn't matter, and I'd pretend I was a gazillionaire, so I have all the money in the world, I'm only going to be happy sitting on a beach drinking margaritas for a short period of time. I'm someone who wants to have purpose in my life. If I don't feel like my work is purposeful, I begin to feel like my soul is being crushed. And every full-time job I ever had, when I got to about the 6-month mark, I'm like, okay, I work for a hotel. I'm selling rooms and space. I've got the title. I've got my name on the door. I get the bonus, all of these external things that maybe I'm viewing that's what success is. But after 6-9 months, my soul felt sucked dry, and I needed and wanted purpose. So it was through the yoga certification that I believe that I found my dharma, which is my purpose in life. So whether Crow were to be successful or not, this is what I want to bring into the world.
And what would you say is your purpose in life?
It is very much, I think anyone who knows me, I'm a little bit obsessed with Crow. I actually actively have to work in a social setting to not talk about Crow, because and I think any entrepreneur, anyone who started a business, it can be all consuming. And I'm okay with that. I love it. I don't mind that. I actually have to work on boundaries to, kind of sometimes separate my passion for Crow, and other things. But I really do believe that Crow is my dharma and purpose.
Can you define Crow really quick for all the
Absolutely. It's an acronym that stands for Coordinated Response on Wellness. And then the practice is there to remind us that we're never freaking perfect and that we're always practicing.
How do you, can we talk about how you integrate what you're passionate about, Crow and just wellness, to Amani's question, into events for group events and meeting planning? What's on point right now? What are some current practices you do for big groups? And
Sure. Yeah. Wellness overall is in huge demand. And I feel like it is for wellness overall in the larger industry, and then that is impacting the live event space. So what Crow brings to the table is we're like a mini wellness DMC. So I'm not, we started with yoga. Crow was born through yoga, but we have over 100 different services. You can click a button and get a Zen-Den package, which would be, 3 different services nationwide, and we have different options. So I'm not, we offer a variety of unique options. So oftentimes for the live event industry, well, what's new? What's unique? So to that very question, we, anything from some more unique ones like cryofacials, ice baths, goat yoga used to be a trend in 2021, 2022. Somehow, I don't know how in the world everyone found out, like, reach out to Crow for goat yoga, but it was nonstop. And now that trend is starting to go out, and other trends are coming in. But we offer, our strength is almost sometimes our weakness, because we do offer so much that it can be, and we're not stopping. Like, we are continually onboarding new services locally, regionally, and nationally.
What's replacing goat yoga?
Puppy yoga?
I've done goat yoga. I love goat yoga. I saw a puppy yoga class. It looked really amazing.
Yeah.
You mentioned live events industry. And I read something recently about how musicians are now really embracing their mental wellness, particularly when they go on tour. What has
Mhm.
been your experience working with musicians, and what advice would you give to people who work as like singers and bands to really properly manage their stress during touring when they're on tour?
Nice, nice. I would almost liken, sometimes I liken our wellness experts to musicians. So a musician oftentimes, and this is a generic blanket, not true all the time, but for a musician, oftentimes they're going to be considered more flighty, like they're good at their skill, but maybe they don't have a calendar that they're booking, like sometimes, and I'm actually very can be very similar. I've had to learn the tools more of grounding. If you look, because you're enjoying what you're doing, you can lose track of time. You can do it for hours. Oh, I was supposed to call someone, So if you don't have that structure built in, and for some of us who are in the corporate world, we're like, yeah, no, a calendar, right? But for someone who is neurodivergent, it's actually very difficult, and you have to set reminders on your phone, okay? And structure those things in, because you remember at 9 a.m. Okay, at 2 o'clock, I got to make this call. Well, it's now 3:30, and oh man, I didn't make that important call. So if you're not structuring those things in, and honestly, whether so for a musician on tour, I suppose a quick like tip example, because your schedule can be so sporadic and different than your normal routine, to help with the grounding, build in whatever routines you can for yourself. Because when that schedule, same thing when you're traveling. If you're traveling for a long amount of time, you're not eating like you normally would, you're not exercising like you normally would, you literally don't, it's not possible. So what can you do to build any kind of routine to ground down?
Interesting. Go ahead, Tim.
I mean, I'm in HR. I'm currently
Yeah,
creating with my company, helping lead the charge on
awesome.
creating what I hope is going to be a great wellness slash well-being program for the company.
Yep.
I've done that in past companies before, but I'm trying to make sure it's specific to our culture, but also impactful and forward thinking. Is there any I don't know the work you've done with corporations or companies on their wellness programs, but any best practices or kind of must have components to a successful company well-being or wellness program that come to mind?
Sure. I'll make a quick distinction, because Crow, we specialize in the live event industry,
Yeah.
meaning it's a one-off event, right? And where you're at as an HR director, you're planning like a program that's
Yeah.
going to be consistent, right?
Hmm.
So my best suggestion, like a survey, find out what people are wanting and needing, are they mostly saying stress management? I feel like the easiest one people think of, okay, fitness. All right, well, you can have weekly fitness classes, sure, but you're not addressing the holistic well being of someone. I know oftentimes, I don't know if your company has an EAP program,
Hmm.
like where because sometimes like someone may need to speak to a professional, and that's great if their employment can cover something like that, where someone else wants to focus on their physical health and get a nutrition plan. There are so many different avenues of well-being. We're starting a coaching program with the wellness wheel, because there are so many different aspects to well-being. And what I'm focusing on, this week or month, maybe your environmental well-being, which we don't think about. But when we're coming into a cluttered space, there's an impact, and sometimes it's subconscious. What about your financial well-being?
Yeah.
There are so many different avenues when you're talking about holistic well-being. So understanding your employees and truly what they most need, want.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
What's been the most challenging thing, for lack of a better word, that you've had to kind of deal with or work through as you're trying to grow your practice and grow your company?
Mm. I mean, I feel like the challenge, like for anyone who started a small business, I feel like the challenges are unending and they shift and change from, client acquisition to employees, someone coming into the company, getting them grounded and trained, and then they have to move, like life changes, what have you. So I feel like there's never a shortage of challenges. What was the big, I mean, I feel like there's been so many,
Mm-hmm.
and I truly think that the decision that I made that grows my dharma, right? This is my purpose in life because, COVID, when the whole industry fell apart and, and a lot of people were walking away, it was like reinstilling in me that it didn't matter, like whether there's how are you classifying external success? Is that in gross numbers? Is it in client? Like, what does that even mean? Because when I started Crow, I was like, okay, my measure of success was that I could walk around Lake Eola any time of the day. Like we didn't have a whole lot of, like readjusting those expectations. We hardly had any revenue, any clients. We were building. But what I could do, I could go to a yoga class at noon anytime I wanted, like that's success to me. It wasn't a fancy Mercedes. It was like, I have control of my own freaking schedule and I can go to yoga every day at noon because it's my company, right?
Mm-hmm. What's your current definition of success?
I would say that two different definitions because I have reconstructed it to be, am I being kind to myself and others? And then more external factors of what's our gross revenue at, what are the margins of each program, what's our client base. We get a lot of business through the DMCs, and how, like, we have a number of different strategies in place to keep growing. So I feel like I don't want to lose sight though, because I feel like when you get so focused on the numbers and like what a businessing person would classify as success, things that really matter can get lost.
Interesting. And then one final tip before I turn it back over to Tim, like what have you done to create, develop, and maintain strong relationships with DMCs? And I'm asking for a friend who is me because I'm going through the same thing here in Vegas.
Sure. Yeah. I feel like the DMCs have been so relationship based. So sales presentations, either in person or virtually, and then it's in building those relationships and those trust. Oftentimes they want a quick response. They need accurate information, descriptions, pictures, pricing, videos, but then they need it quickly. Today is a perfect example, like it's not uncommon for our world to get an email at 3 o'clock and they need a 5 station proposal by end of day. We're not like, oh, that's blah, blah, blah. It's like, sure, no problem. Here you go. And that's, I think, adjusting sometimes, like not letting that stress impact us, not like, freaking out, like this is the reality of servicing DMCs and, taking it. And if we're not able to fit into those time frames, communicating that. And I do think that our ability to respond quickly has really been a benefit to the DMCs and to Crow.
Nice. Over to you, Tim.
Now, I'm just, as a follow-up on I'm just thinking about the group business and the events. Can you give us an example of one of the most popular events you've done recently for a group, and maybe one that went really well, and maybe one that didn't land as well, and it wasn't the right for that group? I'm just curious how that goes.
Sure. I mean, I think we'll operate about a dozen programs a month, right? Whether they're in Orlando or elsewhere. I'll tell you, This one hasn't operated, but I'm super excited about it. We have 3 stations next week. It is our 2 most popular aromatherapy and tea flow stations. And then we have had on our deck a candle making station for many, many months, and we've never actually sold it. So we've just recently sold it. So we've now got pictures, and I guess I'm most excited, and that one's operating next week. I would say, oftentimes when something maybe doesn't go well, oftentimes, I think of it where the timeline, like we have a flow station, but there were it kind of wasn't timed right? And we as a vendor may not like, we don't control the timing of when our service happens during the day. I think oftentimes wellness can be an option. They're not forced to attend the aromatherapy and sound healing workshop, right? So let's say they contracted for 50, but only 20 came, are we viewing those numbers as it wasn't successful? I don't think so. It was a beautiful day and people had the option to go tour a new city, so that's what they chose to do, so yeah, I think a lot of the times, like, again, it comes back to like, what are our success measures, and what are measures that we would say would be unsuccessful. And I no longer view like, okay, we contracted for 50, but only 20 came. That's very much out of our control. And I would say, like my, question, the 20 people that came, what was their experience, and focus on that.
And you used to work on cruises. Do you go back on cruise ships now and do wellness events on the actual cruises?
Well, oddly enough, we just this year had our first cruise ship contract. Okay. It was for an association that had about 6-7 years of doing it on land, but to bring 1,300 people on a cruise ship, it makes a lot more sense cost wise. So that went well. We don't necessarily, so possibly we'll, another avenue to pursue. My partner is a very big cruiser. I think because I worked on cruise ships, I have a different perspective. And if I'm going to take a vacation, usually I would prefer to maybe like go canoeing and being in nature. I feel like sometimes cruise ships can be very constructed fun, and there's a time and a place for that. So it kind of depends. Like generally, I would prefer to do something not on a cruise ship, but I have cruised more as a guest recently.
Interesting. All right, so we got a question here from the chat. Thank you, Tommy Owens. He says, as a team leader and seeing more and more individuals struggle with stress and well-being issues, how would you recommend helping these valuable team members find their best solutions?
I would think, like because I feel like stress is this broad, overall. Is it stress in the workplace? Is it stress in personal like where pinpointing first, where's the stress coming from, and not fixing it necessarily, because there are some problems. Let's say it's a colleague, you can't change someone else, so that, let's say, quote unquote, we wouldn't necessarily want to call them a problem, but that individual that you're having conflict with and stress, hypothetically, you're not responsible for their behavior. They cannot change. You're not going to change them. So like, what can you do? How can you shift, knowing that this person that's causing you stress, it may never change, right? But what are you doing? So I'd say first, what is where's the stress coming from? Is it a coach that someone should, would recommend to talk to? Is it better boundaries, saying no? It's such a broad term, stress. So
Okay. Well, if you want to give us some more details, Tommy, in the chat, thank you. We've come to the point in the show where we flip the script. We allow you to ask both myself and Tim any
Uh-oh.
question that you like.
awesome.
Nothing is off limits. Who would you like to ask a question to first?
I would love to ask Tim a question.
Go ahead.
Tim, so what do you do in your life to manage stress? Like, what are some go-tos for you?
It's a great question. I mean, I could not to go too far into this, but there were several years ago I felt like I was getting really stressed. I felt like I was getting stressed with my family, my kids, with work, with just pressures outside of work, and so it got to be a bit much. So I don't know. I feel like drew a line in the sand one day and made a conscious choice to say I'm going to reconstruct my life and my schedule and my world to I'm going to have a stress-free life, and I I actually declared that. I
Yeah.
let my family know like I'm not going to be involved with drama. I let my friends know I'm not going to be involved with drama, or you come to me if you want advice or something, but I'm not going to go down the downward spiral like you were talking about. And I was not going to let problems at work get to me. And I was not going to let my something with my kids or something get to me. And that has actually stuck with me all along. So I think that what do I do now? I think that like I said at the start of the show, I think it's really helped that I have some outlets outside of work. So it's a good balance of, I do my day job, which I love, and I'm in a job that I love, but I also make sure I'm doing time, filling up my spare time with creative projects and things that really make me happy, and I think make others happy as well. And then of course I have to incorporate um, fitness is a big part of it. So whether
Mhm.
right now it's pickleball, hiking, Orange Theory, maybe I'm probably doing too many things right now, but all that stuff to me is the added together is an equation for my kind of low stress, well balanced life.
Yeah.
Great
Nice.
answer.
I
Nice.
love what you said about declaring, because I feel like I
I
think,
declared it.
yeah, yeah, because I feel like we're honestly creating our lives. Like, so, and I think sometimes we don't realize that or want to blame someone or something outside of ourselves. So,
I
like,
mean,
when
it's
we,
been a good 10 years that since that happened, and I don't think I've been stressed a day since then.
well,
Nice.
well,
Impressive. Okay.
Amani, what about you? Same question. How do you manage and handle stress?
I'm still working on that. So, I'm trying to follow maybe Tim's example. I every once in a while I like to dabble, play maybe a video game here, read books, particularly nonfiction. I would think those are really good, to kind of just, a little mind candy.
Mhm.
Um, go for walks. I need to do more of that, but that's a good one. And I need to kind of pick up, like I take improv classes. I'm on a little break right
Mhm.
now. That's really fun. And then I think I'm in the process of getting ready to learn how to play pickleball. So I
Ah,
think those things, because of the fact that I work in music and I'm always around music sometimes it'll work, but most of the time, like, that's kind of what I do. So it's a little less of a stress relief. But those are some things that either I'm going to continue to do or I'm going to start to do even more of.
Nice, nice.
Yes, yes. Great
Um,
question. So I'm going to ask my kind of final question, and then I'll let Tim kind of bring us home with his final question. But I want to kind of take you back to when you're probably still in Florida, I want to say, and you were at, Palm Beach Atlantic University, and you're graduating.
mhm.
And what advice would you give your younger self based on everything you've learned so far in life?
Oh, that's a great question. I
One of my
honestly,
favorites.
yeah, yeah. I think that if I could talk to the younger me that was graduating college, so there's a quote, I think Einstein said, a fish can't climb a tree.
Mm,
I, you know, got a college degree because that's what you're supposed to do, right? I'm like checking boxes on what I think I'm supposed to do. And honestly, at that time, there was a friend and a family member who was suggesting to me to try yoga, but I didn't. I was like, I go to the gym, like, there's not much of I didn't really understand it. So I didn't do it at that time. And I feel like for so much of, for more than a decade, I'm trying to, like, create what I think success is. And I was never being successful. And I think it's because I wasn't truly being authentic to myself. Like I'm a fish trying to climb a tree over and over and over. And I'm not, I'm either like leaving the jobs or it's not my choice. And I'm being told, thank you very much, bye bye. And this repetitive cycle can, left me with, uncertain, confused, not sure of like, who am I in the world type of a thing. So I honestly wish I could tell myself that, it sounds cheesy, but like follow your passions, follow that rather than trying to, um, get a title, get a job. And that's what success is.
Mm.
Um, yeah.
Yes. Great. Great advice. Over to you, Tim, your final question, and I'll close us out.
Yeah, Kristine, what advice would you give to someone who's maybe just really starting their wellness journey, really trying to, take wellness, by the horns and get their life together? What are some basic life? And that's probably a loaded question, but what advice would you give to someone who's just deciding they want to turn things around?
Sure. There's a helpful tool called a wellness wheel, and it breaks down into 8 different categories, 8 different wellness categories, some from physical, emotional health, financial, et cetera, et cetera. I feel like it's a helpful tool. You can kind of take an assessment of all of these areas and where you are, and then, plan for, what do you want to focus on first. And then also, I feel like I know I work best with a group, a coach, someone, because I feel like you can plan these things, but having that support and accountability sometimes can be really, really helpful. Like we can let ourselves down, but if there's someone partnering on that with you, they can say, hey, remember last week, last month, you said this. Have you done anything yet? And help move you forward.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, Kristine, we have the people can contact you via your LinkedIn. So we have that ticker going along. So just thank you very much for being on the show and talk to us about stress. Particularly one of your final answers in terms of you can't be a fish and climb a tree is going to resonate with me deeply. So I appreciate you sharing your wisdom. Bum we didn't meet at IMEX, but very soon we'll meet. I feel confident. And just thank you for what you provide to the industry and keep doing it.
Thank you so much. I truly appreciate the opportunity to be here and meet you both.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Kristine.
Round of applause for Kristine there. We'll put you back in the green room. Yes, yes. We're going to put you back in the green room, and here we go. So, Tim, thanks again for being your second time. Did even better than the first time, being a great guest host. So appreciate it. Really quickly, tell the people how they can find you and support you.
Yeah, for work stuff, you can always send me HR questions through LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. For when I look at my creative stuff, the best place is my one-stop shop. It's witchlandplay.com. You'll read all about the graphic novels and the plays, and I have a new play that's going to be going to New York in May called Point Loma, which I'm really excited about. So you'll learn all that stuff at witchlandplay.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again. Thanks again to our guest today, Kristine Iverson. Next week, we have Tracy Judge coming to us from Sound Needs Connect. So that'll be another great guest for us. Mandy will return next week. So when she gets back next week, make sure we tell everyone how much we missed her. And with that, I thank everyone. We'll see you. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast or the live stream on whatever platform you use, whether it be Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, all the above. Leave us a rating or review. Thank you all very much for watching and listening live in the recording, and we will see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.